Nice. Awesome. Sweet. Well, we'll go ahead and get going then. I will do a quick round of introductions, but thank you all for being here today. And for those that are watching the recording later, thank you for taking the time to kind of hear our voices for a little bit. But we're here to talk about really the impact AI is having on retail development. We'll kind of go through a brief history of retail if you're not a history buff, like a few of us are on here. But we'll kind of get into where we think the market's going, and we've got some great intelligence here on the call to kind of talk us through it. So let me go ahead and start with our introductions real fast. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Cool. Can everybody see that? You guys looking good? Awesome. So I am Jack, and I'm here from TestFit, for those that have seen my face on LinkedIn or other things before. My background's in architecture and urban planning. I run new markets here at TestFit, which is really just showing that TestFit works for other things besides industrial and multifamily, because we do a lot. Previously, I was at GGP in Brookfield and worked on mixed use retail repositions. Those are familiar with GGP. General growth. They got acquired by Brookfield. It was pretty fun. And then we did some ADU development out here in California. But I've got some great intelligence here today with Ben Freeman and Ben Witten. So let me just introduce Mr. Freeman. Go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, sure. Good afternoon. Like Jack said, I'm Ben Freeman. My background is in development across the board, construction, finance, design, leasing. I spent a little over 14 years with Brookfield/GGP in a couple tours of duty. This latest one ending in over the summer, where I left to start ThirdShore Development, which is a development firm really focused on design-driven retail and mixed-use environments. So happy to be here with you all. In my younger years, I spent some roles in finance and everything, and originally from Chicago. We were talking before we got on, one of the greatest cities in the world. So don't believe everything you read.
Best city in the world. All right. Thanks, Ben. I'm Mr. Witten.
Awesome, Jack. Thanks for having me. This will be fun. Yeah, good afternoon, folks, or good evening, wherever you may be dialing in from. Good to see the group. I'm Ben. I lead strategy for the real estate vertical here at Placer.ai. And I'm one of those crazy people. Jack, I guess you and I are in the same camp of, had a 15 years experience in the CRE industry, and now in my second career on the prop tech side. And so definitely have a foot in both camps, all things, development, site selection, working with our REIT clients, working with, retailers, restaurants, brokers, et cetera, around really optimizing their footprint and fleet to best serve their customers. So it's an exciting world, right? Where kind of real estate and AI converge, and excited to dive in today.
Yeah, no, exactly, Ben. You and I kind of come from a similar cloth. And, as you guys can tell, I'm not the cool guy in this call. There's both of our Bens here are very intelligent, and I've talked with both of them over the years. I've worked with Ben Freeman for a little bit as well, too. And really what I'm excited about today is they're both very much visionaries in their own right, coming at it from different aspects. So excited to kind of get into it. So we're going to go ahead and do some cover topics here. Feel free to put questions into the Q&A as we go. We'll do some Q&A, like dedicated sessions near the end. And then hopefully you guys will all come away, learn something, or just, had a good time and hung out during lunch. So let me go ahead and I'm going to stop sharing my screen. We're just going to start to chat. So I'd like to start off with really supply chain logistics, right? So take us back, 2010, 2015, right? That little bit of a half decade there. Amazon was coming out. They're doing 2-day delivery. Everyone's so excited. They're calling for the, the death of retail, right? Curious, Ben Witten, take us back there, when you're kind of working during those times, like what was the vibes like, if you will? What was kind of going on? What was everyone saying about retail back then?
Yeah, it's interesting. If you kind of rewind back to 2015, 16, and really 17 in a very big way. As Amazon was becoming more and more mainstream, there was this, I think, concern, certainly from institutional capital and kind of the market writ large, around, is there going to be a need for brick and mortar retail long term, right? You had this like rapidly growing online sales segment, and there was originally kind of thinking of like, are we going to need retail? We've got a few thousand malls in the country. How many malls are we really going to need? How many lifestyle shopping centers are we really going to need? And so for a number of years, right, it was kind of like nobody really knows. And is there a ceiling or a cap to e-commerce penetration? And I think what we all saw is in the pandemic, people were forced to adopt e-com and omni-channel, whether they wanted to or not, right? Like
Mhm.
grandparents and great grandparents were buying groceries online and or doing curbside pickup or some combination of all of the above. But I think what we've seen is that the retail assets that survived the pandemic and really thrived through the pandemic proved the durability and really what it means to be essential and necessity based, daily needs. And so I would say kind of through that experience, we've learned retail has become a darling asset class because of that pressure test. Whereas before it was kind of unknown as this a nice to have or a need to have. And I think now we know retail, especially good retail, is a need to have.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. There's the pressure cooker of the last, few years of, forced adoption and almost like a pendulum swing back now, right? We've got historically low um, vacancy rates and all that kind of fun stuff. But Ben Freeman, being on the ground with, some of the larger owners of retail assets, like what was the vibe? What was everyone thinking? What were we kind of looking for?
I think we very early on recognized that doing nothing wasn't going to help. So I think you had a early on, I redeveloped our first anchor box in 2012. Brookfield GGP moved very quickly in my time to try to capture experiential tenants, right? My time, I delivered a Putt Shack and a RH mansion. So we were always on the kind of the forefront of trying to really focus on retailers who are investing in a business who wanted an active dialogue with their customer in bricks and mortar locations, while some of the demand skepticism of how are people going to shop, how are people's wallets going to be allocated, kind of played itself out, right? And so
Mhm.
over the course of the 7-10 year run there in the 2010s, there's a heavy amount of investment in there, and that really preserved a lot, and actually ended up growing a lot of asset bases and driving traffic and really underpinning successful retail environments. And I would just layer on that was a lot of adaptive reuse. There wasn't a ton of new supply, right? So just overall broadly, the retail market sort of took a 10 year hiatus of actually building new inventory of any significant magnitude, while that demand profile worked itself out. Now you have a very strong demand profile. Consumers very healthy, and with a supply restraint over better part of a decade. That's I think why you're starting to see much more of a bullish outlook on the future.
Yeah, no, I love that. And what you kind of mentioned there too, like getting into the experiential side, right? Experiential real estate is at first, open to that adaptive reuse, right? When we had the extra inventory, that sort of thing. But now, experiential means different things to different brands. And like Ben Witten, for an example, I'm sure you're seeing, or I'd love to hear like what you're seeing from the retailer's perspective on like what are they doing differently now that experiential is starting to become the norm, right? Good retail is not just like a transactional event, right? We're now looking at it from an experience. And so what does that look like from a real estate perspective? Like how am I looking for my, core customers, that sort of thing?
Yeah, it's everything from, what's the experience of convenience or really value. Those are kind of the two, paths. It's like it's really the middle that wasn't necessarily more affordable or experientially appealing that has suffered. Whereas, you've seen brands that have embraced experience and brands that have embraced value have really been the ones that have thrived. And I think as it relates to experience, that's everything from bringing more entertainment and, leisure and what have you uses into retail environments. One example of that, my former employer, I was at Trademark at Galleria Dallas. We had a Belk department store that went dark, and that's now going to be one of the first Netflix house, theaters in the country, right? And so kind of what you were saying, Freeman, like pivoting from a historical use of a department store, but now really a use that is absolutely going to be more experiential. It's going to have, Netflix merchandising and content, and really be able to kind of iterate and pivot in real time with the trending content on Netflix, right? So you think about, to me, like it's pretty ironic, right? You think of what was the most stale, stigmatized, asset class in CRE, like malls, right? Like, oh, you want to go hang out at the food court and go to Hot Topic after this and go buy, a studded belt or something, or a, cool band t-shirt. Like that's
Oh,
kind
we
of
all
the
knew you
mall we
owned one,
think of.
Ben.
What's that?
We all knew you owned a studded belt back in
Oh,
the day.
yeah, who didn't? Who didn't, right? Of course, of course. But now it's like you've got, cutting edge, Netflix, right? Like one of
Yeah.
the FANG stocks is now going to department stores. Like it's the whole thing's kind of flipped on its head. Pretty wild.
Yeah, no, it's interesting too. Ben Freeman, you mentioned one of my top five favorite retailers, if I'm allowed to have one. But RH, right? The RH Mansion, and Chicago history, of course, coming in here hot is, the RH Mansion was started because of Three Arts Club Cafe up in the Gold Coast in Chicago, which for those that aren't familiar, you should absolutely go and check it out. Not a brand plug or anything, but it was experienced through and through. But it's in my mind, it's a testament to what logistics did for retail, right? Improved logistics, I should say, right? Like back in the day, I mean, we used to order something. If you ordered it online or through the store over the phone, you expected in what, 2 to 4, maybe 6 weeks, depending on what it was. So being able to go to the store, pick it up, that was convenience before. And Ben Freeman, you and I talked a while back about AI and retail and that sort of thing, and you had this great comparison of like logistics to retail is what AI is to office, and just looking to see if you could expand on that for the folks out at home.
Yeah, I guess my perspective on it is that a lot of the AI effects on retail it's already here,
Yeah,
right? The reason you have a $7 spatula show up at your door within 4 hours is because of AI and because of logistics and because of all of the machinations and the incredible technology, and the investment that has gone into that sector. And so having said that, then it does sort of take an RH example that you brought up, Jack, where there's a firm that's really reallocated how they might traditionally run their business, right? Nothing in stock, restaurant on a beautiful conservatory. So all those investable dollars into a point of sale really has nothing to do with the actual credit card swipe, and everything to do with developing a brand dialogue, and a projection of a lifestyle. While on the backside, where nobody sees anything, there's the furniture's not behind the door, right? The furniture's in a North Carolina warehouse. The furniture's in a warehouse in Ohio or something like that, and it's going to come to your door. And it's just a totally different business model. And so I think you have to recognize there's retailers, and if you're starting a business today as a retailer, I have a product, I want to sell something, it's going to look very different than it did 5 years ago, even, right? You couldn't called Witten 5 years ago and been like, hey, I know we're all I kind of started this digitally native thing, and I kind of know a lot about my customer. Hey, can you help me? Like, where should I locate? What should I do? And so you even from that location intelligence, that customer data, all of that is ongoing behind the scenes, 100%. And so it's not, you don't have to do 500 locations necessarily to actually reach your customer in malls and strip centers and power centers. You can try to do the right 50 to start, right? How are you really driving and growing your business? And so I think you see that really taking hold on the American consumer as it relates back to AI, because it's a consumer economy, right? So it only naturally makes sense that they're going to sort of derive the benefits of that to begin with. And then I think when you look at office, just to sort of go there, how do we work, right? Like going back to Witten, it's kind of like, they're in that 14, 15, 16 time frame. There's a lot of questions like, are bricks and mortar going to be needed? Are they not going to be needed? I think office is right there in that journey of a lot of those questions, which we don't have great answers to, or certainly we don't have consensus answers to. But I think you're going to find that it's going to end up pretty similar to retail in that, you know, it might be allocated a little bit differently, but the importance of having presence and having interactions in person, just like it is with retailers and customers, is going to be very much similar. And the importance of building relationships and doing business in person. And those places are going to be, you know, the good places are going to be even more valuable, you know, 10 years from now than they are today.
If
Yeah,
I could
no,
just
great
add on
point.
to that, I think,
Go
you know,
ahead.
like real estate follows people, right? It's a people business, and it's all about where do people want to be, where do they want to spend their time, whether that's where do they want to shop, where do they want to work, whether that's at home in their pajamas, or if that's on, you know, Wall Street or wherever it is. And to your point, Freeman, like the whole, you know, disruption that was the retail apocalypse that is now happening to office in its own way is I think a very similar, in a lot of ways similar, in some ways different, but it really stems from the this concept of like where do people want to spend their time? And everybody talks about the flight to quality, right? And the fact that
Mm.
you've got trophy office buildings that are commanding record high rents, higher than they ever have before. But, you know, simultaneously, like even Class A just below that is struggling. Obviously, B and C are struggling in a big way. Some of the data that we've looked at, and Avis and Young actually did a really nice job of putting this together in their office busyness index. If you look at management consulting and their rate of utilization, trophy buildings are back above pre-COVID levels, but anything Class A or lower is down significantly, you know, down 50% or more, or 70% in some cases. And it's companies, you know, it's like the KPMGs of the world where it's like, we're going to leverage this moment in time and we're going to optimize for the future, thinking about recruitment and retention. We're going to choose the best building in the market. We may need less space, right? I mean, companies are generally taking 15 to 25% less space than they were before, but they're opting for newer and better. And so I think, you know, like you were saying, Freeman, like retail kind of went through its disruption. Office is going through it now. And I think what we're seeing, starting to see, is that those trophy assets that are highly amenitized, highly walkable, and desirable from a recruitment and retention standpoint, are they going to be the ones that thrive?
Well, you know, what's interesting about exactly what both you guys are saying is not only just the flight to quality, but the changing of what the definition of quality is, right? Like access and visibility, right? We talked about this last time. That's the biggest part for retail, but you know, the trend kind of started earlier on, and Witten, you kind of alluded to it with the Belk, you know, example, and Freeman too, with, you know, the backfill, you know, rehab scenarios, is that like the mall used to be built around, we have anchor tenants that drive traffic, and we have inline tenants that absorb, you know, that traffic, right? That script was starting to change a little bit before the, you know, the logistics boom, and then, you know, it's really starting to show that like it doesn't matter your footprint size, it matters your experience draw, right? And I think, you know, even with office, you have trophy assets that aren't necessarily like main and downtown, you know, Chicago, New York, Miami, San Francisco, right? You have trophy assets that are now in the suburban area that are driving, you know, some really cool occupancy rates and some cool experiences, like you said, Witten. So, you know, with that, like, with that change, you know, what are, and Freeman, you kind of alluded to this too, right? Like if you wanted to test a new concept, you had to go and, you know, call up the big mall companies and say, hey, can I get space somewhere? I want to test this out in 80 locations to find my customer. You don't need to do that anymore. So like Ben Witten, like what are people doing? Are they coming in like with a, you know, exact narrowed in, you know, persona that they're shooting for? Are they looking at areas automatically? Like what are retailers doing now to find like the best real estate for them?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's a few different kind of avenues to go there. There's, you know, there's the brands that are direct to consumer, kind of digital natives, right? They started online and now they realize that, you know, e-com is expensive from a fulfillment perspective, right? Like you've got to ship the goods out to the customer. You've got to handle returns and reverse logistics. By the time you get returns, they're often damaged or they're out of season and you've got obsolete inventory. And so for a lot of reasons, it's not long before these brands decide, okay, we need to physical presence to one as a billboard in the market, right? To demonstrate our presence, to showcase our brand. Like Viore is a great example where beautiful stores, right? They are very well thought out, aligned with kind of the design aesthetic of the brand. And it's a way to go, touch, feel, experience the brand. But also, Freeman, like to your point, if maybe the merchandise is there, maybe it's like you can try something on, but then order online a different color or size or whatever, and it's at your house that afternoon or the next day. So I think the smartest brands are really embracing omni-channel in a very big way. I mean, Target, 95% of their sales come through physical stores, whether that's an online purchase or in-store purchase. But at the end of the day, it's, this idea of like, who is my customer? Where is my customer? Then how do I best serve my customer? And I don't know about you guys, but for me personally, it depends what it is, but I'm kind of like, there's certain things where I want to go pick it up in the store myself. I want to see it. I want to try it on. I want to make sure it fits. I tend to procrastinate. So it's like, I need a new pair of pants or a new shirt and I'm going out, to a conference. Like, I don't have time to make, to return it, do shipping labels, all that. Like, I want to try it on, make sure, it's what I want. But everybody's different, right? Like you guys may be totally different. So I think having the optionality for the consumer is really important. And it's knowing, taking that data, first party data of, okay, who's my customer? Where do they live? What do they look like? Like, what are their key psychographics and segmentation? And then as these stores, they often come to Placer because they want to know, okay, where should I open stores? Where should my first stores be, or my 50th store, or my 500th store? Where's the next best opportunity coast to coast based on, demographic alignment, co-tenancy, it's not going to cannibalize my existing units. So it's really kind of marrying that online and offline data to get a full picture of where do I best fit in which markets, and then down to the site level in those markets, what should my next move be that's really optimized for accretion to the brand and also four-wall profitability.
And I just to layer on that, I think we talk about I know I referenced the startup or the newer businesses or businesses that are growing. There's plenty of examples of existing businesses that are legacy businesses that already have good real estate or already have a bunch of units across the region or a country, and now really like you see whether that's customer experience apps or their data now they're just so much more intelligent or have the ability to be much more intelligent about who is their customer, right? And it's just not just like soft good retailers, like everybody from F&B and where my delivery and where the Uber Eats and the DoorDash, all of that is just touch points to then try to be a better, optimal, more profitable business, right? Grocery,
Yep.
great example. Grocery, I think you have to be careful about any absolute statement. Grocers are dead. This off. You just because it's not true. Because you order groceries one week and you're like, gee, this is great. The next week you get a batch of green bananas and you're like, I could have just went to the store.
Yep.
So we all have instances of that. So there's nothing absolute. Is sometimes it more convenient to order groceries and them to show up or you to go pick by? Absolutely. Will that always be the case when you need sour cream? No. Right? Like it's just so you have to be very, very careful on some of those things. And I think at the end of the day, the retailers and people that are trying to sell something to somebody else are going to be most effective when they embrace the ability for AI to essentially be like a multi-disciplined augmentation thought process that's going to take a whole bunch of lenses and pull a whole bunch of things together to try to make smarter, more effective, cost effective, or more revenue driving effective decisions. I think that's where you're going to see the wins. Continue to see the wins.
Yeah. No, I love that, right? Like, it's not just we've talked about omni-channel for years, right? Everyone talks about it. But you really have to get into a different calculus for your demand gen, right? Like, what is my demand gen for local? What is that? How does that impact my store footprint? Because you could go get, sour cream tomorrow because you need it, or a shirt, but like I could order it in bulk because now I know I like it, right? And for both of them, right? I want to try something new, whatever it may be. So, Ben Freeman on the development side, your boots on the ground, Ben Witten and I are little up in the sky a little bit now, more so. But once the a retailer has the location that they're looking for, or general location that they're looking for, what are the hurdles that they're seeing now, and how is that being solved?
Well, I think first of all, you just generally when you build anything right now, production costs, right? Producing inventory, it's expensive. It won't always be that way, but it's a little bit of a race between inflation and interest, and that's true in retail. That's true investing in your business. That's true anything. So, kind of if you set that aside, what would be more of the secular hurdles is that I think still like there's a couple things in real estate. We love a good silo, right? Like I'm the multifamily guy, I'm the office guy, I'm this thing, right? And I only do this portion of this aspect, right? And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
true in some of our customer base too. Is that how does that AI break down silos on their business? How do we use it to think about things differently? How do I go to Ben to Witten and be like, hey, I got an idea about this. Anecdotally, how do I improve my empiricism around my theses? Across the board, whether that's where people want to live, or where they want to shop, or where they want to work, or where the best access is for trucks and logistics and rail, whatever it might be that your sector is in. I think you have to have it open-minded as what tools are out there as a developer that's going to exponentialize my ability to deploy capital or behind a strategy. And then I think just generally speaking, I think what it'll help do in development and really even in acquisitions and stuff like that is get scenarios much more, if I use TestFit to come up, I have a program, right? I'm going to use TestFit, and TestFit is going to give me 4 different examples. Okay, now I have 4 different cost structures, to try to put together a deal, which one's the cheapest, which one gives me the most rent. And I can do that so much more quickly than I ever have in the past by using, AI and generative intelligence and all the technology that's available at our fingertips. So I think that's as a development standpoint, boots on the ground. When you have retailers that are working well with it, and you have developers and investors that are thinking about it and using tools on both ends, I think you're going to start to see those and where those deals really start to come to fruition.
Well, I like what you said too, 100%, like on the silos, right? Like everyone has their niche, right? Or niche or whatever you want to pronounce that word. It's like gift to me. Everyone pronounces it differently. But like how do you break those down, right? And it's a lot of, from my experience, it's a little bit of fear of like lack of knowledge, right? Like I'm a retail guy. What do I know about laying out a multifamily building, right? Or I'm an office guy. How do I know if like the unit sizes are going to fit in here, or if this is even the right market for it? So like Ben Witten on your side, right? Like, are you seeing people come from all different avenues to try and like get Placer to show them, alternative use or, alternative asset classes to put on locations, or how does that work for you guys?
Yeah, definitely. And it's funny because I think at least in my experience, the retail people tend to, underestimate the complexity of multifamily, and the multifamily people tend to underestimate the complexity of retail. And it's
Oh
like, oh,
yeah.
you're building apartments, you're just building widgets, right? You just go copy and paste them, right? You just stamp them out. There's nothing to it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's obviously a lot of economic and entitlement and all sorts of factors, uh, one probably has to learn through experience. And then on the retail side, it's like, oh, you just add some commercial space to the ground floor and you put a coffee shop down there, like, or a restaurant or a gym. Like, what could possibly go wrong? Like,
The
it's
build
like,
it and they will come scenario.
yeah, it's like, oh, your bay depths are way too deep, or oh, you don't have the right exhaust to actually put a restaurant down there. Oh, you didn't have the right insulation to have a gym, and now to have anything other than like restorative yoga is going to be highly disruptive to your residence on the second floor. Like, there's all these kinds of things, right? And like trash and what have you. But like to your question, trying to get myself back on track. To your question about like, are people using AI to integrate alternative uses? Definitely. And that's actually an area where Placer's added a lot of value around, I would say, aligning, you know, the counterparties in a transaction, whether that's like the retailer and the landlord, or it's a residential developer and retailer around like, let's have a objective source of truth that says this is, or maybe it's not a good site, but we can help highlight the areas where, in Placer, this is a great site based on the traffic counts, based on the demographics, visiting the location, based on co-tenancy, right? All of that. And so that has, in a lot of ways, democratized, deal making with a lot of these retailers, having data to have a level playing field for a negotiation and a conversation around why this is a good fit for, Starbucks or for, F45 or whoever it might be. So that's definitely a part of it. On the comment about silos, I completely agree. And I think as real estate people, historically, like we tend to silo ourselves into markets. Like, oh,
Mhm.
I'm the Dallas guy, I'm the Fort Worth guy, I'm the Florida or the Georgia, whatever. And I would say the other thing that AI is doing, especially in retail, is again this whole idea of like democratizing data and making it widely available and standardized allows market participants to be, in some ways, market agnostic, right? It's like, I know the fundamentals of what make a good site for Starbucks. And so I can take what I know, having worked in Texas, I can apply that in Georgia, I can apply that in, Ohio, et cetera. And so I do think that's one of the biggest advantages of AI is you have more informed market participants. And as the market participants are more informed, the universe of potential opportunities becomes vastly wider than it otherwise is, where I need to be an expert in every single, dot and freckle in my market to know it like my hand. Like now I can take what I've learned and apply it much more universally across the country. So that's one of the things I'm
Yeah.
most excited about, with what AI is unlocking in real estate.
Well, right. Like I like to think of AI as like the assistant intelligence, right? Like, you can hire an assistant, just, or, an associate or something like that comes out of school and they're going to know a decent amount, but you're going to have to train them up, right?
Yep.
With AI, it already comes at that base level intelligence. And so it starts with the plan. You can start to understand some of those things that, like you said, you wouldn't understand from another market because you don't really know what you're looking at, but you can bring in some of that background data. Some of the things like you guys were saying of like, multifamily underestimates what a retailer's world looks like, right? Cannibalization is not something we really talk about as much in multifamily as we do in retail. You're like, oh yeah, I could just fit a grocer here. We're just going to put a grocer, even though there's like a Whole Foods and a Trader Joe's and a Walmart down the street. You're like, well, which grocer are you putting in here, right? What are you actually going to get? And I think that's where like that kind of data comes in. And then from the site planning side too, right? Like being able to have some good base level intelligence of like what makes a good parking ratio, right? We talk about access all the time when it comes to those types of things. And unfortunately, we're not actually at the full self-driving cars or anything just yet, but parking ratios drive layouts, right? They can kill a deal. And so being able to have those types of things automated and looking at zoning and all of that kind of stuff that TestFit can provide is pretty cool. So,
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ben. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna add. I think you when you think of domain knowledge and right AI is to your point, right? AI is going to be better for a developer, better for retail, the more information of higher quality information you give it, right? So if you're a multifamily developer who has developed 3,000 units and you have a design guidelines and you have all of this thing that you can feed in there and say, then test this versus that, right? It's going to be a much better situation than, one guy in a truck who's never done anything before. He's going to be better too. He's just going to be better in a more generalized way, right? So you look at a lot of these companies that are actually developing their own, right? Because they're recognizing off the shelf, it still needs to learn the business in which it's trying to teach or trying to uncover some of these insights that otherwise maybe wouldn't be there, or these checks and these balances, and try to deliver the speed. So I think that's why you start to see some pretty heavy investment and on proprietary AI with established companies that have the data that are trying to then unlock the next wave of growth by better utilization of something that's just kind of latent in their business, or
Yeah.
a byproduct of years and years of success.
Yeah, 100%, right? Like there's a lot of coordination with like the off the shelf products, like Placer and TestFit and others, where you can start to integrate that intelligence, right? And keep it for yourself, right? You're not training open models, right? ChatGPT, I think months ago, changed it so you could keep it to yourself, right? which is, becoming bigger and bigger with AI privacy and keeping your secret sauce secret while starting to learn from others, right? It's like
also, but also giving it to a black box, right?
Yes.
It's the
Yeah, we all want access to everyone else's, but we don't want everyone to have access to
give
ours. It's
our
like
own.
comps, right? Comps are inherently
Totally.
flawed because no one wants to actually share what they're renting for, but I want to know what you're renting for. It's always the fun stuff. So, this is the bad crystal ball question, but we're at a good spot, I think, for retail, right? I think we're all very, bullish on the fact that we have healthy consumer, healthy demand, and low supply. Great opportunity for development. But what do we see? Where do we see that going? What's the thing on the horizon that'll be super cool for retail for the next 3 to 5 years? What are you guys kind of hoping for or thinking about that's coming down the pipe? I'll let whoever wants to go first.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, the first part of your comment there, there's definitely challenges around expansion. We've, a lot of these restaurants and retailers alike have very aggressive growth mandates, how many units they need to open over the next 12, 24, 36 months. And as we've alluded to, with the cost structure and capital markets, in a lot of cases make that, cost prohibitive for new units. And there's just not a lot of new supply being added. And so I think for the owner perspective and developer perspective, that bodes well, obviously, just in terms of, fundamentals, and for the owners being able to be more selective around, merchandising, choosing the best brands that are going to, not just pay the most rent, but have the best synergies for cross shopping and co-tenancy, because there's kind of an upward spiral right around that, especially if there's percentage rent involved. And so a big part of that is knowing, okay, what are the best brands to cohabitate with the highest propensity to cross shop, and maybe that are also, counter cyclical, right? So we had a client that brought in a fitness use into a grocery anchored center, and the grocer had there was an REA in place. They had a restriction on any sort of fitness use. And the client was actually pretty savvy. They were able to prove that, through Placer cell phone location data, that the utilization and shopping pattern at that grocery store was very different than the pattern for the fitness use. And so they were able to get the restriction waived and bring that fitness use into the center. And it's actually worked really well, and it improved sales for the grocer. So I think that's a pretty kind of simple use of data, but there's also much more complicated and complex ways that retailers and real estate folks are integrating their own first party data and kind of macro level data to inform those decisions. I would say personally, I'm bullish on real estate as an asset class. We talked about kind of the dumpster fire we went through, and from 2015 to 2020, 2021, was brutal. And over that time, you kind of saw institutional capital allocation to retail go from 20% down to 10%. And it feels like, given the durability of good retail and the fundamentals we're seeing, at some point there's got to be a reversal in trend where you start to see institutional capital rotate back toward retail, which I think will speak to the ability to exit at higher pricing, and also just get better terms on financings and capitalization. But to say it shortly, I'm bullish on retail. I think there's a lot of tailwinds behind retail, going
I
forward.
love it. Yeah, I love it. Ben Freeman, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, I would share the optimism. And I think when you see the real estate market in general is just slow to change, right? we're slow to adopt BIM. We're slow to, I mean, anything that is AutoCAD versus Revit. How long did that take? I mean, right? Everything just takes longer in real estate because it is so disaggregated, and there is such varying ways to deploy capital and make money. So it's not a matter of, I think, if. I think it's just a matter of when. And I think you have to think. I think about a conference I went to, and there's a futurist there, and so the future's already here. It's just not evenly distributed. And I think when it comes to retail, I think I'm really bullish in overcoming some of the cost and capital markets hurdles. Is really, how is that real estate priced? Historically, it's like, oh, I can do 15% occupancy and I can make money. I can do 18% if I do over $1,000 a square foot. I can do a restaurant if I'm 8 or 10%. Okay, great. Those are rules of thumb. But when you come back to we're slow to react, that was when you were doing 500 in a matter of like 5 years because you were blown and had huge growth expectations. And so those rules of thumb always all had contingency. Right.
Yep.
Like, I'm going to be an okay company if I generally I have some, I have high volume stores that I'm paying 10% occupancy. I have lower volume stores that I'm paying 20% occupancy. Geez, it feels like 15 and I can kind of business plan around that. Right. But now you go to Witten and that, and you go to Jack, and I'm just making smarter decisions. And I should end up with, 150 locations that are like all profitable. Like really profitable, right? If I'm doing things right? And maybe my margin of error, maybe I missed 10, right? Maybe I'm missing 10 out of 200 instead of 50 out of, right? So how does that affect price? Well, it should be, those rents should go up. Right. And we're not quite there. And how, what does that mean to a business? And I think we're getting there. We're not there yet totally, but I think you have to start to think about it in a different mindset of the downstream effect of how it's priced so that we do get a better inventory going forward. And I would secondly say, and all of this machine and learning and generative AI and everything like that, like retail specifically, is I'm bullish on the ability to create emotive environments, emotion environments that move people, environments that people want to be seen at, right? It's the mimetic thing. It's not just that I'm wearing Lululemon, that you see I'm wearing Lululemon pants or insert whatever brand or whatever thing you're trying to do. And that aspect of it is going to be even more valuable going forward than ever. So I think when you combine those two, I don't know exactly when or what that totally means, but I think it does mean, a return of capital allocation and growth to a asset class that has been kind of meandering for the better part of a decade.
Yeah. No.
And just to piggyback real quick,
your
comment about can I pay a 15% or 18%, of sales? And I think this whole, omni-channel, the channels have really blurred between buy online, pick up in store, return through store, conduct another online transaction that gets delivered to my house. And I think what's historically there's been kind of like a wall between those two worlds. And I think over the next 5 years, maybe sooner, we'll see, but that wall goes away, right? And I think that means landlords start to have better visibility into online sales activity. I can say, okay, well, for all of these zip codes that are in my shopping center's trade area, your online sales were X, and therefore the true value of this store is significantly greater than what's transacting through these four walls. And so we know the halo effect is real. You open a store, online sales go up. You close the store, online sales go down. But as more data becomes available on that front, I think it's going to further. It'll be interesting to watch and align.
Completely agree, because you're as a developer or landlord, somebody's gonna show up and be like, "Well, I can pay that," and you'd be like, "Well, how do you know that?"
Yeah,
and they're like, "Well,
why?
we're not willing to share. We're not willing to share it." Or and be like, "Next." Right? Because I know you have it, and if you have a good business, I know you have it. So it would be great if it was be more transparent, because then the good real estate would be a result of where people want to be, whether that's living, working. Preview 10 years from now for office. I think this conversation could be very much similar to that, and how people use space and how space priced. How do you get people to get out of their house and into office buildings, and what does that mean for a business? It historically has been here, but over time, walls break down. It does take a long time, but I'm 100% agree with.
Yeah, no, agreed with both. Summary on that, my takeaway is AI is removing the risk, right? Like Ben, Freeman, that's kind of what you're saying, right? If you can pick the best real estate right? You know, it's supposedly removing the risk from like the downside a little bit more. And so you should be able to pay a little bit of higher price because the risk has been removed too. But also, you know, from that perspective of having good data to say, like, you know, from the brand perspective and the developer perspective of what's the true value of this real estate. It's not just what's in this four walls, but it's what's happening, you know, in the near trade area. And then, yeah, exactly. Like, right. What will we be having this conversation in 5 years for around office that like, hey, if you have an office location here, your productivity goes up, you know, your team is happier, that sort of thing. Like, what does that look like? You know, what are those metrics? That'll be super cool. I do want to be respectful of time. We've got about 12 minutes left ish, you know, on our time, but if anyone has any questions, feel free to hop in. I just have one more for the guys. You know, we talk about a lot of real estate and it being transformative. And truthfully, my favorite part about retail is that it's so flexible, right? You know, we talk about in the market today of like, well, does office become, you know, multifamily? You know, I think it'd be fun to do a case study of a micro urban mall in a suburban area taking a C or B class, you know, small rise tower or mid rise tower and turning it into a mall. That'd be pretty fun. But for retail, but you know, for you guys, like, what's that asset type for retail that's you're most bullish on, right? We're all very excited about retail at large, but like, what's that look like? Is it the super regional mall, the lifestyle center, the pad, the, you know, power center? What are we looking at?
Well, you know where I'm go. I great access, great visibility, and whether that's convenience in the sense that it's low friction, right? There's great parking, it's convenient, you know, it's the right uses for the quick trips or high payoff environments that, you know, people are willing to go to and maybe withstand, you know, a little more traffic or have to valet their car or something like that. But the experience is so worth it, or the tenant mixture is so worth it that it doesn't feel like it's right. It feels low friction. So I think those are three components, and I think that's I could name any of those asset classes that you just reeled off, or that fit those profiles, right?
Yeah,
So when you look at it through
sure.
that lens, like, you know, there's great grocery anchor, there's great strip centers, there's great power centers, there's great shopping centers. So I'm not trying to evade the question, but
You're good.
you know, I would also put on there, like, you know, I think the the power of differentiation, and being able to offer something that somebody else can't, right? Is incredibly impactful, and I think those three things, if you do those three things in one way or shape or form, you're essentially delivering that, and when you do that, that's, well, retail, that's the name of the game, because you're going to get shoppers, you're going to get diners, and you're going to get them frequently, or you're going to get them for special occasions and drive sales a number of different ways.
I love it. Mr. Witten, what do you got?
Yeah, I would say not necessarily, you know, unique to a specific asset class. I mean, I completely agree. Like the access, the visibility, you know, drive through, convenience, all of that, super important. And, you know, especially infill sites, there's only limited supply of that type of inventory. So those sites are harder and harder to come by, and there's a lot of competition, you know, for them. So definitely, you know, see a lot of very, very bullish on that type of product. But I would say also just, you know, real estate is simultaneously a very macro business and a micro business. And what I mean by that is, like, people will say things like, oh, you know, we're only in the Sun Belt, or we're only in Texas, or we're only in, you know, we'll do a deal in Kansas, but not in Missouri or whatever, right? And it's like, okay, well, why? Like, and is that, you know, founded in logic or reason? And not always, right? And so I think what that means is, inadvertently, you have like opportunities that are overlooked for various reasons, right? Because humans are fickle and have different reasons to favor or not favor certain locations. But I think what that means is every market has, you know, a main and main, right? And I think what that could mean is that, based on kind of the confluence of data, where those market dominant locations exist, but might be in markets that happen to be overlooked. So if you can own the best real estate in a secondary, tertiary, or maybe a third or tier market, like there's definitely a play there, right? Because there's there's a populace there. There's people that may actually be more inclined to shop, in person, et cetera. So I'm bullish on, markets that might be overlooked, but, main locations.
I love it. I think that exactly what you described is like what Ben was talking about earlier of, the more data that you have, you can make a better decision, feel confident about it, even if it's in a market you've never touched before, right? Which is, what we're hoping all to achieve is, hit those growth mandates, make sure we're hitting the right spot, and don't create waste. So that's kind of all I had for everyone here. Just, can you guys all see that? That's all coming through for you. Thank you all for joining. It's been a fantastic conversation. Please reach out to all three of us if you have questions, comments, if you want to get in on some of the data side. Placer, super fun app to play with, and learn a bunch of information on. ThirdShore, if you want to get in on the boom that's definitely coming, because we're all pretty bullish on it, definitely reach out to Ben. And then if you need a site plan, definitely don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate the time.
Thanks, Jack. It was fun.
Thanks, Jack. Thanks, bud.
Have a
See you,
good day.
everybody.